You've changed since the last time I saw you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I am going to start this afternoon's meeting as we do have to do the election of officers. So we are live on YouTube and we do have quorum. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with that. So right now I'm going to ask if there is a mover for the nominee of chair.
Elizabeth, I would like to nominate Jacqueline Collier as chair.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Jacqueline, would you be willing to accept?
Yes, I would be very honored to accept.
Excellent. Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Neal, perfect. Thank you very much. All those in, oh, sorry, before I do that, are there any other nominations on the floor for chair? Seeing none, I will close nominations. All those in favor for Ms. Collier as chair? I'll need to see, sorry, all those in favor, any opposed? Okay, excellent, that carries. So Ms. Collier is our chair, and I will now look for nominations for vice chair.
I'd nominate Tara Everett as vice chair.
Okay, excellent. Ms. Everett, would you be willing to accept that?
Yes, I will.
Excellent. Is there a seconder for that motion? I see Ms. Collier. Excellent, thank you. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, seeing none, I will close nominations. All those in favor for Ms. Everett as vice chair? Any opposed? And that carries. Excellent, thank you so much. And I will turn the meeting over to Ms. Collier.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Happy New Year to our new committee. And I will just take a moment as well to say thank you to our past committee members who have finished their term for their service on this committee. So Elizabeth had circulated some terms of reference for this committee, and I wonder if now might be a good time, Elizabeth, for that to be reviewed, if you would like to do so.
Actually, what we're going to need to do is we're going to call the meeting to order, and we'll need to do the approval of the agenda and move through it that way. Those references that I had sent out, our Housing Services Department is actually going to be touching on those during their briefing for us.
Yes, absolutely. No, I just mean regarding this committee, our role within this committee, how the committee itself actually functions, its purpose.
Yes, that will all be touched on during the briefing.
Okay, perfect. That will be part of that briefing. Lovely. Okay, so we'll put the meeting to order and we will begin with the approval of the agenda. Can I have a first for that? Councillor Neal, thank you. And second, Councillor Doherty. All in favor? Thank you. So then we'll move into the confirmation of minutes, so that the minutes of the Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee meeting number 05/2020 held on September 10th, 2020 be confirmed. Can I please have a first for that motion? Councillor Doherty and Michelle McCarty. Sorry if I said that incorrectly.
It's okay.
Thank you. Thank you. And all in favor? Thank you. So next would be item 5, disclosure of pecuniary interest. So I'm not sure if we should take a moment to review pecuniary interest or just if everyone is aware of what that is and there is no issue here. Yeah. Okay. So seeing none, we will move over to delegations. And I don't believe we have any delegations at this meeting.
That's correct, Madam Chair. There are no delegations today.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move over to briefings. And I'm happy to introduce Ruth Nordegraff, our Director of Housing and Social Services. As well, we have some others here, Mitchell Grange, Manager Housing and Homelessness, and Joanne Boris, Housing Program Administrator. So they are also present to provide the committee with an overview of the services provided by Housing and Social Services. So I will pass it over to you, Ruth.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Happy New Year as well. It's really nice to see all of you and to meet some new faces. So really excited about this new year and the work that we'll do at Housing and Homelessness Committee. So I know I have about 10 minutes just to, and we thought it would be good to just go over the role of the Housing and Social Services departments and kind of the scope of the work that we do within our city, just to set the stage, I think, for a lot of other conversations that will happen, obviously, at this committee and other tables. And as per Elizabeth and Madam Chair's comments, we do have a slide in here as well regarding the terms of reference of this committee. And I will kick off that conversation, but I'm sure there will be some other questions and follow-ups on that component as well. So, and I should say I am Ruth Nordegraaf. I am the Director of Housing and Social Services. And as per Madam Chair's comments, I'm super happy to have a few of my colleagues on the call as well, Mitchell Grange and Joanne Boris. And I'll introduce you kind of the team and what we do and how we work as well as part of this conversation. So if we move to the next slide, and I think I have some help there, I hope. Yes, there we go. And actually to the next slide, I just really quickly, and I know we're obviously talking about housing and homelessness at this committee, but just to give you kind of the context of our role as a city, because it's not as straightforward as a city and another city department in our corporation. So housing and homelessness, or housing and social services for that matter, we are as a department the service manager for a variety of various provincially prescribed programs that are available to our residents, not only in the city of Kingston, but also in the county of Frontenac. So where this committee is different as well is that we also are looking at the county of Frontenac, and we have representation of the county on this committee as well to support. The staff at Housing and Social Services really are focusing on three main areas. And I just wanted to mention the other two because sometimes there is definitely a crossover. So we are also within our department responsible for the delivery of social assistance programs. So obviously Ontario Works, as many of you are aware of that, but also some other programs to support people with income supports. Obviously, we manage the housing and homelessness portfolio, which I will dive into in a few minutes, but we also are providing supports for parents with childcare subsidies, and we are providing operating funding towards the childcare centers. So diving into the housing and homelessness kind of division, which I will jump on in the next slide. As I mentioned, I just wanted to make you familiar with some of these positions and names because they will be part of this committee quite often. Obviously, Mitchell, who is the manager, who you will hear more from in the next agenda items. So he's overseeing the division. Joanne Boris, who is a housing program administrator, specifically focused on the homelessness part of the system. Nicola Reeds, who's not on the call today, but I'm sure you will meet sooner than later. She is also a housing program administrator and is specifically focusing on the social housing components. And then we have John Henderson, who is also a housing program administrator, but he's focusing on the affordable housing piece. And I will touch on that kind of continuum of the different elements of the division in a minute. I also wanted to highlight that we have amazing other staff in our team that work on education, data management. We have housing caseworkers that really manage our social housing waitlist. We have an administrator helping us with a lot of the rent supplements. And we have clerical support through 2 amazing individuals as well. Just wanted to give you that sense of what's happening behind the scenes when we are talking about some of these projects. So then jumping into the current system in the next slide, I just also wanted to give you a sense of the policy framework that we work from. So obviously, you know, there's lots happening, as we all know, in housing and homelessness, and super, very grateful that you're all committing time and energy on this committee. But these are really some of the key policy framework documents that we work off. And I would suggest for those that may have not been familiar with it might be great to familiarize yourself with these documents, and we're obviously happy to share this through the committee clerk for some reading. So on the federal level, the key document is the National Housing Strategy with some good kind of direction on where the federal government is going, and obviously how that relates to funding to the various levels of government. The provincial framework is obviously really important because they're quite involved in setting some guidelines and expectations for us as service managers. So the province has a community housing and renewal strategy that's very much focused on the housing development, social housing and affordable housing developments in the future. On the local level, we have kind of 3 key items that are established that would be that are really providing us with the direction as a department. We have our 10-year housing and homelessness plan and the 5-year updates that the committee was very involved in over the last few years. We have the Mayor's Task Force on Housing implementation plan with implementation items that Council approved in December of 2020 that provides us also with our jobs or our next steps. And obviously we have our Council strategic priorities that also very much focus on housing and housing development. We are also working, and this is on the agenda today, on our homelessness system review, and you will obviously be very much involved in that process as well. So moving forward on the next slide, I think a lot of you have seen this slide, but I always want to kind of bring it back to the housing continuum and the work that we do. So we are, as a department and as a service manager and for this committee, our focus really starts on the kind of homelessness side on the left, in the red, and goes towards kind of the affordable programming, rental, and home ownership. Of course, we are always looking for the synergies and the relationship with the market rental and ownership, housing development, etc. But within our jurisdiction at Housing and Social Services, we are not directly involved, but we're obviously very much partnering with our planning departments and our real estate colleagues and others to kind of be part of that conversation as well. And I will just dive into those real quick. So on the next slide, and I'm not going totally from homelessness to from right or left to right, but I wanted to start with social housing. So our role as a service manager in the Kingston and Frontenac community is to manage 2003, and that number is established by the province in a service level agreement, but 2003 RGI units. So those are units where the households, after obviously being eligible and having, gone through an application and a wait list, where our residents are housed that have a certain or are not are never paying more than 30% of their net income towards their housing cost. And I know I wanted to put on there some average wait list of, unfortunately, the time that it takes to get into some of these social housing housing units. I am happy to say, though, that our wait list, which used to be quite a bit higher, has been going down over the last few years. It's still high. We have about 1,100 people on our wait list. About 100 of those are already housed within social housing, but are waiting for a transfer. So obviously our role is to manage or to fund the various, and we have about 16 different housing providers that manage social housing for us, fund them, to work with them, and obviously to also find more ways of supporting people that are in social housing. We have introduced, for instance, the portable housing benefit over the last few years that we also have, we also really see that that has reduced the waitlist amount, but there certainly is a lot of work to do on this specific portfolio. I also should say that the province is going through a lot of changes, and a lot of the work that we do within social housing is really something that goes, that is mandated through the province. So we're excited to see some changes and some modernization within the social housing sector that allows us as a service manager to be a little bit more creative and nimble in this specific component of the division. And I'm sure we'll touch on this at some point, but I just wanted to highlight this just as a starting point. So the next slide. We also obviously have, and it's been on top of everybody's minds, a really crucial role as a service manager and as a city to develop more affordable housing in our community. Council has been doing a great job in identifying additional capital investments. The council, the current council has identified $18 million within various capital reserves to put towards housing developments. And I think in 2020, we've been able to move forward on a few of these projects quite within a pandemic. So I think we're in a really, we're moving forward on some of these projects. One of them is on 1316 Princess Street, which is going to add 90 affordable housing units ranging from 60% from RGI at 60% to 80% average market rents. And we're also working on existing buildings that we have procured in 2020 that we are moving into more supportive, affordable housing solutions. I know there's a lot more to talk about, but I just wanted to highlight that that's part of our portfolio and conversation as well. And on the next slide, I also wanted to highlight that we are doing more than just building units. We are also supporting residents with a home ownership program, which helps first-time home buyers with the down payments. We're also working on a Renovates program, which helps people in the lower income brackets with either emergency or more long-term repairs. And we have a program that helps people that want to establish a secondary unit in their home with a grant to maintain those units in the affordability brackets. Again, a lot more to say about it, but I just wanted to start that piece for your awareness as well, so you know that that's all within our scope. Next slide. Obviously, something that we've all been very, very familiar with and became very familiar with as a community over the last year. The third kind of key component in our portfolio is the homelessness services that we fund and manage. So we work with a various number or a couple of different providers that are providing these different components of the homelessness system for us. And I've just highlighted them here on the slides. Ultimately, our ideal scenario is that people are not becoming homeless. So we are funding agencies that have staff that work on really the prevention and diversion of people prior to them potentially becoming homeless. Unfortunately, if somebody does become homeless, we do have emergency shelters. We have shelters providing supports for youth, or youth shelter. We have an adult shelter, and we have a family shelter. There's also a shelter in Kingston specifically focused on vulnerable or women that were victims of domestic violence. We're obviously connected with them, but as a service manager, we are not the direct funders. That is directly managed through the province. But we do have a variety of different emergency shelters in our community. We also have a homelessness prevention fund, again, that quite often gets paired up with other services where we are helping people with one-off funding, such as rent arrears, utility arrears, moving costs, etc. And again, through our Ontario Works departments, but also with our partner agencies, we're able to provide those funding pots to people. And then on the next slide, sorry, I'm talking a lot, taking a breath. We also provide, and I know this has been quite successful over the last few years, Housing First program, where we are able to move people from the emergency shelter into a housing solution with the various kind of, again, case management supports that's necessary. And then again, I think most of you are familiar with this. Over the last year with the pandemic and also with a lot of the lessons learned of the system over the last few years, we have been able to pilot the Integrated Care Hub right now on 661 Montreal Street, which is really tying together the housing or the needs of clients that are typically more higher needs with various services such as healthcare, social services, and in this case also a consumption treatment site on in the same building. And I know it's still, obviously a new service, and we're working through that. I think it's a quite innovative service, and it is really kind of the stepping stone for a conversation around tying together housing, homelessness, housing, social services, and healthcare, because quite often vulnerable members of our community really need more than housing. But we're all providing a part of that puzzle. So I think it's a really exciting time. There's obviously a lot that's happening, and it's not an easy topic and an easy part of our, regardless, I think every component is quite challenging, but it's definitely a really good time to be part of this committee, I think, and discuss some of these items and provide advice and suggestions on how we can move forward as a community. And we'll touch on the system review later, but this is kind of where we are right now. And if we can just go to the next slides. And I know this is really just a very high level, quick focus on what we do. And I would invite you to always just reach out to us if you would like to talk more about specific topics, because there's a lot to discuss. As discussed, the committee purpose, this committee, and I know you were distributed the terms of reference. And again, as staff, we obviously are here to support. We're not, I mean, Elizabeth and her team are here as the clerks. But I think the two kind of key components that are in the terms of reference I've highlighted here. And I again, historically, over the last few years that we have been supporting as staff this Housing and Homelessness Committee, we have, for instance, really benefited from this committee supporting us with the update of the 5-year Housing and Homelessness Plan. And right now we are in the midst of our homelessness system review, which again is a place where this committee can come in and help and advise. But there are certainly other issues that can be brought forward either through this committee or we as staff can obviously bring things forward. But I think there is an opportunity to really kind of look at the holistic kind of housing and homelessness system, policies, initiatives, developments. We as a department work, obviously we have a provincial kind of framework that we have to adhere to, but there are also local directives that we can establish or change. And again, as mentioned, many strategies and plans that we can implement. So maybe Elizabeth, I don't know if you would like to add something here or if we want to discuss this after. I know the current terms of reference has a few items in there that are a little bit dated because it speaks about a poverty reduction group that I don't think is in existence anymore. So I think we definitely need to have a conversation about the terms of reference and if everybody is, I think, comfortable with what it looks like moving forward. I might wrap up and then open it up for questions so we can talk about this and others. So the next slide, is questions. So I know this is really a high level overview of who we are and what we do, to kind of lead into what this committee could touch on, or obviously, there's many items that this committee can bring forward within the scope of the committee and the terms of reference. I think the more like practical piece, and Elizabeth can correct me if I'm wrong, but this committee typically meets quarterly. And if there are any recommendations that are coming out of this committee, they go to the Arts, Recreation, and Cultural Policies Committee, I guess I'm saying that right. And then they go to council. So there is always an opportunity to bring things forward as well to council. But I know there's some very seasoned councillors on this committee that probably know this much better than I do. So with that, I just wanted to, again, thank you for your energy and passion to sit on this committee. And we as a staff, are happy to support and bring things forward for discussion and advice.
Thank you, Ruth. And thank you to yourself for that overview, and to yourself and your team for the work that you've been doing over this very challenging last year and moving forward into the new year. Does anybody on the committee have any questions for Ruth or her team? Councillor Doherty?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Well, Ruth, I thought that was a fantastic presentation. When I joined the committee 2 years ago, I don't remember receiving that, and it was really helpful, even now, 2 years later, to go over that. And I wonder if you could actually make, perhaps without any of the colored kind of pictures, just a copy that you could send to us that we could even put in our binders. That would be really, really helpful for future reference. I noticed when you said the committee purpose, there was real frustration last summer that we weren't meeting because of course, the concerns around Bell Park. And the response at the time was that the committee is to respond to the reports from staff. So I wonder if you could address that, and if that could be changed, if that is part of.
Thank you, and through the chair, that's a great question. And I think, again, I think it might be good to have a conversation about the terms of reference. Again, we are here as staff to support the committee. My understanding from the kind of the terms of reference is that the focus is on policies, strategic plans, and they're not necessarily one-off issues that the committee would respond to. I think, again, and just as an example, for instance, the work that we're doing on the homelessness system review, or the work that we're doing on the encampment piece, is certainly an appropriate kind of item to bring forward to, or have the committee to be the kind of the key entity for. My understanding from the situation in the summer is that the committee is really looking at that broader policy piece, not specifically one situation. So I think the encampment situation definitely has led into a broader conversation that would be addressed at this committee, if that makes sense. But again, I think it would definitely be a conversation that I think as staff, we would have that's been our interpretation reading into the terms of reference. I think, again, back or there's some other situations that I think are happening, and there always are initiatives or conversations happening in the community that I think could be brought forward as more of a systemic conversation, or a conversation that then can lead into any potential policy changes. I hope that answers your question.
So if you would like to change that, or any of that, is this the time to make suggestions?
I think I would then have to, I think that is, I do apologize. I think that might be more like a question for the clerk, Elizabeth.
I at this point, as we're talking about the briefing, in terms of reference, asking questions of staff and that sort of thing, we can definitely do. Comments and that sort of thing, it's definitely worth having that conversation. I don't know that this is the appropriate time for a number of comments in that thing, as it is supposed to be an information brief from staff to the committee to help them understand what the terms of reference are and what their role is within the committee. If they're looking for changes to that, or if there's additional conversations that need to happen, again, that can be brought to the committee, perhaps as a business item at a later time.
And I've noticed Councillor Neal, so we'll go over to Councillor Neal and then I'll speak following, if that's okay.
No problem. Was Tara ahead of me? I think I saw her hand flash up. Maybe not. I think I shared with both Ruth and with our CAO the terms of reference that come with the nominations process. And they are much broader than merely addressing reports. And I think I do share Councillor Doherty's comments, because we've all received throughout the summer and since constituents who continue to ask why meetings are being canceled in a time of a homeless crisis, which is identified clearly as happening. So I think the first step towards better defining what our duties are on this committee probably is to look at what we put out when we're asking for people to volunteer for the committee, what the criteria is, because it is definitely broader than just a meeting merely to speak to staff recommendations. So I think that might be a good first step. I was on this committee for a number of years leading up to just a few years ago, and I'm really happy to be back on. And I appreciate the work that we've done in the past, and I think we need to give the community a place where they can speak to a committee about issues that are really, that they find really, really frustrating or important. And that doesn't mean that every person who comes before us in a delegation is going to lead to that, but it gives to a motion or to alter our policies, but it gives the community an opportunity to address this. And I think Peter was on when Dave Jackson was the chair. Do you go back that far? And I know that Dave Jackson was very, very adamant about, even when there wasn't a staff report on the agenda, there was still an opportunity for committee members to discuss issues and for the community to come in delegation. So, and that was when we were meeting, I think, monthly or every other month at least. So now that we've gone quarterly, I think it's even more important. And the other thing that has nothing to do with this, if I disappear off the screen, I'm always within earshot. I have a dog that's scratching at my patio door, or I have a coffee waiting for me. So if I disappear, it's not a comment on whoever's speaking. I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. Francesca Crete, I see you have your hand up. Oh, you're on mute, Francesca. You're just on mute, Francesca. You would just have to unmute. There you go.
Okay. All right. Still getting used to my new laptop. Anyway, I totally agree with Councillor Neal. I think that, and thank you, Madam Chair, but that the community needs to be able to voice. I mean, we hear from the most outspoken, but not necessarily the brightest, or I don't know how to put that, the most grounded people. And I think they need a bigger voice. The other point I wanted to make was I've heard that Reverend Andrew from St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church Clergy and Princess wants to offer the manse in some capacity towards homelessness or creating another hub. I'm not sure. Is there anything happening on that front?
Ruth, if you may.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. That's an excellent point. Thank you so much. Yes, there is some great initiative through the church to look at purposes for their building. We have been part of that conversation, and the ask has been shared with all community partners that are working in that kind of area, and they have done. I would say a simple expression of interest to seek some interest from the broader community on who would be willing to and interested in potentially operating that building. So yeah, that's an excellent point, and there's definitely a few more not-for-profits or churches or agencies that are looking at their properties and how that can be best used. So, and maybe to quickly go back to some of the comments that were made by both councillors. I just wanted to clarify that we as staff obviously would always welcome opportunities for the public to speak to this committee. I think that really, you know, again, that's where the clerk and the clerk support is you know, I think that always has been, as far as I'm aware, the intent of the committee. So I think as staff, we would definitely also very much welcome that opportunity to hear from the community. Again, I think we kind of were just moving forward on a certain approach where we were just bringing reports forward as that was kind of what was done in the past as an opportunity to get feedback. But we would obviously very much welcome that opportunity as well.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Ruth. Peter, I saw your hand as well.
Thank you, Jackie. I think that Councillor Neal is correct, and yes, I was part of the committee when Dave Jackson was the chair. And as I recall, I don't believe that the terms of reference have been reviewed for a number of years. So this might be a good time to look at them, bearing in mind that the original terms of reference were the ones handed down by council, and I would assume that from a governance perspective, if we were going to want to make changes, they'd have to go back up to council. And it might also be a really good opportunity to have a discussion about that fine line that a committee like this walks. That I don't know that the intention from council, or at least my impression, the intention from council, was that we were to stray into operational areas. I suspect that Ruth has enough people who think they've got a supervisory role with her department without adding another one. But certainly it'd be I think maybe a good opportunity to pull out some the stuff that the Councillor Neal was talking about, and the original stuff from council, and have a good discussion about what it is we think that means, and then that could be fed back up through ARC to council.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate that. So, I mean, I will say that we're in particularly turbulent times. We can never underestimate the power of good communication at any point, but particularly when there are so many in need. And we happen to be a city of heart and passion. We have a passionate base of people who want to make sure that their neighbors are cared for and well cared for. And it's a beautiful thing. So this particular committee, its purpose is powerful and meaningful. We have a wonderful staff who is doing an exceptional job, continues to, especially over these, as I said, turbulent times. And so I'm starting my second term on this committee. And I do recall at the very beginning, when I had first commenced, it had been suggested that new business, if there was anything prior to a committee meeting, should be brought forward to our clerk. So in this case, to Elizabeth. And then she could add it to the agenda, as well as look into it with city staff in advance. I do think that regular updates is really what everyone has been looking for, is where are things going? How are things right now? Are we taking the right steps? We don't want to wait as a city, as a community of people, to a time that's too far, to ensure that we are constantly acting in an aggressive manner for those who are homeless within our community, and those who are on needing housing affordability and that type of thing. So everybody's heart is in the right place, and it's just a matter of making sure we find the right way to address it as a committee, as well as to bring in more voices as well, and ensure everybody has the opportunity to express. Councillor Neal, I think I had seen your hand as well. I'm sorry, you're still there.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think this is an opportunity. And I just want to point out, under our rules of order, the chair of any committee can call a meeting for a specific reason. So if something came up and members of the committee think this falls within our terms of reference, and it isn't us stepping into Ruth's kitchen, but allows us to bring forward something, at the call of the chair, we can set up a meeting. And when we had meetings on a monthly basis or a bi-monthly basis, that wasn't probably as critical as it is now. I think Councillor Doherty will agree that councillors receive a heck of a lot of emails around council meetings during the summer and early fall, because of the publicity of our homeless crisis in Bell Park. And so that's always something that's available to the committee or the chair in order to do that. So, and I appreciate what Peter said. Indeed, if we look at, I don't think it's ever been altered, because the clerks have never changed it, and they're hyper efficient about these kind of things. They have never changed the terms of reference that appear every time we have a nominations process for new members to this committee. So that would be a good place for us to start. And if we weren't living in the COVID nightmare that we're living in, I'd suggest that we have a lunch meeting and sit down and do exactly that. But obviously that's a few months away. But having an additional meeting to look at our terms of reference or to bring it forward at our next meeting, I think was a really good idea.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. And I agree. And for every member of this committee, please reach out as well at any point to review anything, and together we can make sure that we are doing what we need and that we're meeting as often as we need to be meeting in order to ensure we're doing our very best part here. Yes. Did anyone else have any further comments on that? Okay. So seeing none, were there any other questions for Ruth regarding her briefing? Perfect. Okay, thank you. Ruth, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you for doing that. So next we'll move into business. So we have the Homelessness Services System Review. It was an information update. The report of the Chief Administrative Officer had been attached and circulated to this committee. Now, this report is for information purposes only. Is there any questions regarding this report, or is there anything, Ruth, that you wanted to review regarding the report? Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. So just real quick, and I probably will ask Mitchell and Joanne to join in as well. And I should say we also have Pamela Macero on the call. Pamela is helping us with some of the a lot of the engagement, because obviously we as staff, have input on this, but we also want to make sure that we have an independent external support to do some of the engagement with the funded agencies and with the clients. So just really quick, just so for those that are new to the table and as a catch up for those that have been at the table for a little bit longer, we have, as I've just mentioned, one of the three components within our division is the homelessness system, which really holds a lot of different components. So it's not just the emergency shelter; it also holds a lot of the other pieces of the system to really support people that are either at risk of homelessness or are homeless, or potentially recently have been housed and need the support. So it's a broad system. And we, as a service manager, about 5-6 years ago, made some changes to the system to introduce the Housing First approach, which has really been successful for clients, but there definitely also have been, new challenges and realities that have come up over the last few years with clients that really need a slightly different approach. We as a system manager are funding agencies and have agreements with agencies with a certain set timeline. The timeline of these current agreements with the funded agencies is expiring in the summer of 2021, so this year. So that really is a good opportunity to, again, go back to what is our system? How do we think the system should look like? What works well? What doesn't work well? And of course, we all have heard a lot about the things that are not working, but also there are things that are working well. So let's also make sure that we keep what works well. So ultimately, the process that we started back in, let's say, the summer, early fall, is to start that review. And so obviously our team has been working on not only looking at the existing components, but also has been looking at, has been starting the engagement with the providers, with clients. And this report is really to provide you with an update of where the process is at and how we're moving forward. And we're obviously in the midst of a lot of the components. I might hand it over to Mitchell if he would like to add a few pieces to that process as well.
Great. Thank you, Ruth, and Jacqueline, through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thanks for that context, Ruth, and it's nice to meet some of you now new virtually here, and others, it's nice to see you again. So what I will add to that is just kind of a little bit of context going back to, as Ruth mentioned, last year. So in September of last year, we came to committee and presented a report providing a very thorough overview of our system and how all different programs are funded through, if it's through the community homelessness prevention initiative funding from the province or municipal dollars, really broke down each program, how it's funded, kind of stats that go along with those programs as an overview, very thorough overview to the community. And as part of that, as Ruth indicated, that we identified that we had previously addressed the need to go through a thorough review to enter into new contract agreements. And only certainly the pandemic only brought that more to light. And what we heard loud and clear is when we did a city-led initiative at Bell Park with the encampment there and all those individuals where we had a needs assessment done, that we knew at that time, and we heard loud and clear that there's a lot of concerns with the current structure of the system. So we have gone through one round of agreements, which were renewed for the same terms once. So now with the work that we're doing with our 10-year plan and our recently 5-year review to that plan as a requirement back to the ministry, is we weren't comfortable obviously renewing with the same terms. So we've really taken the initiative and have heard loud and clear from the community that it's time to do a thorough review. And that's where we have engaged with the independent project manager who has led that for us. As well, we've established an independent advisory committee, which is outlined in the report, who has really helped with guidance for Pamela as our project manager and staff. You know, they've been able to provide their insights and experiences of a local context to help guide those discussions. So what has happened to date is there's been engagement with the key kind of senior management as well as frontline staff at all the funded agencies, as well as some unfunded agencies as well who provide support within the community to get their input as well. We've also been working through the engagement with the clients themselves. Obviously very important to hear their voice. So what the next kind of steps of where we are at is that all that information will be compiled into a thorough kind of report with recommendations to us as a city for consideration as we work on creating a new structure and framework for our services moving forward, which will help shape the RFP, or sorry, the request for proposals as we work towards this sometime in the summer or fall of this year. So hopefully that provides you with some good context and an overview of the report. And certainly with Ruth, myself, and Pamela and Joanne, we're happy to take any questions that any of you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitchell. Ruth, was there anything else that you had wanted to review regarding that?
No, the only thing I would like to identify is again, speaking of the role of the committee, we definitely are hoping to bring back, to Mitchell's points, the kind of recommendations to this committee. And at this point, we're looking at April. But again, there might be reasons to have further conversations or further input as well. But we're definitely committed to get a good kind of initial list of recommendations that will lead us into the RFP process. The other thing I would like to point out, because I know that is a really important component, we as a system, the definition of the system will be, and the scope of the system is important. So obviously we, as a city, as a corporation, have certain funding pots, and we are providing funding through these funded agencies, and we want to make sure that if we fund agencies that we're funding the right pieces and have the right evaluation and accountability and pieces in place, which we're obviously working on. But as part of this review, we're also working with, for instance, other agencies that might be providing direct or indirect homelessness services that are not funded through the city. So it's almost this, we're trying to really navigate, like we have a certain, we as in the service manager, the city of Kingston, we have a certain responsibility and to kind of really use the funding that we have wisely and effectively. But we also need to make sure that we continue to have that really good kind of seamless relationship with other partners. So this is the United Way is holding the funding for from some of the federal homelessness funding and is funding some other partners that are in the system. So it's also really that conversation. So we're definitely bringing forward our piece in the RFP, but there's also a broader conversation that probably will continue to take place moving forward. I think that that's one of the things, maybe in line with some of the comments that were made by some of you earlier. I think we really need to find a way to be as nimble as possible with the system, because it's always evolving. But we also need to be able to find ways to provide some stability and capacity within the funded agencies, because you cannot say, oh, we're going to fund you, but if things change, we're going to not fund you. So it's this balance that we're trying to really find as well as a system.
Thank you very much. So I see Councillor Neal.
Sorry, I don't mean to take up all the airtime here, but I know I've shared this with Ruth and with Lanny and perhaps with Mitchell as well, but one of my concerns is, as we've streamlined the homelessness shelter system, we've ended up with, I know that there's a youth shelter system outside of that, but what I hear from, and what I heard loud and clear from Bell Park over the summer, was that even when there's vacancies in our existing system, there are sometimes people that are turned away, that are banned, and there is no alternative as there was in the past. Or that if say I'm a woman, there used to be a woman's shelter, now it's all under one roof. If I go there and my abusive ex-partner is there, I have no alternative. Although I've heard that Dawn House sometimes finds a bed for somebody in that situation, but it's not the way that we had a woman's shelter in the past. Also, if I'm on parole, one of the conditions of my parole is that I can't be in the vicinity of a co-accused or somebody else. I can show up there, and if it's 20 below, I can show up at the existing shelter, and I have to either make a decision to breach my parole, or I have to go back out in the cold. And when that happens, we used to have Tim Hortons, where I could go and sip 2 coffees for 7 or 8 hours and be able to not freeze. That with COVID has been taken away from us as well. So I think it's really, really critically important, and Ruth has heard me harp on this before. It's really important that we have more than one homeless shelter provider. So, and I see Ruth wants to respond to that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. Ruth, please go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, thank you for that comment, Councillor Neal. And of course, with also the establishment of the integrated care hub and other conversation around the development of the 2 properties that the city has purchased, we definitely are seeing that we cannot have and I said this before, and I feel like I'm overusing it a lot, but it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and it really is balancing, a system where we do see some very, positive outcomes of clients, and they're always, I feel like it's, again, balancing, the stabilization of the clients, but also setting some expectations in how we can help people move into, if they are stable enough, into a housing solution. But I certainly recognize that we need to look at that, and in the system review and in the kind of the values and principles of that, we have identified that we also really want to look at specific populations, specific kind of really the trauma-informed approach, the harm reduction approach. Like, we are really looking at that. And again, we're learning. We have moved into a new approach. Some things have worked really well. We are now also seeing some challenges. The pandemic has even highlighted this even more, which I think it's really challenging, but I think it's also providing some silver lining in really thinking more in partnership. So I certainly want to, let all of you know that that is something we are looking at. And I think also finding a way to really, again, as a corporation, as a service manager, have clear expectations and measurements in place. I will say though, it will continue to be a conversation that we can definitely make some changes and improvements on. There's also some bigger systemic conversations that need to happen, I think more on the provincial level between different funding silos. So but I'm going on here, but I definitely just want to say absolutely, we're working on it and we're trying to really find that as happy as possible balance between all those components.
Thank you, Ruth. Peter, you may go ahead.
There we go. Maybe just to echo a bit what Councillor Neal said. I think if we look back over the development of homeless services in Kingston, particularly Housing First, I think that the city has done a pretty good job in terms of with all of the difficulties we've had, like low vacancy rates and things like that, trying to get folks into housing. But it to me, it's becoming clear, or has become clear, and the pandemic has exacerbated it, that there are a group of people that you could house 3 times this month and they'd still be back on the street. And I think that, and that's because there are other issues involved. And so I think that the fact that the city is doing this review at this point and looking at gaps is a really positive move. And the more information we get, I think the better off we're going to be. It may well lead to some difficult decisions and difficult conversations, but I think it's really a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Thank you, Peter. Is there anyone else who would like to comment towards that? No. Okay. So, following.
Sorry, Madam Chair, if there are no further questions from the committee, perhaps we could ask if members of the public who are with us today, if they have any questions regarding the business item.
Perfect. Thank you. And I believe there is a 5-minute speak time as well. Is that right?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Perfect. Is there anyone from the public with us who would like to speak?
I do see that I have a Miss Solomon here today who would like to speak. So I'm just going to unmute her here and see if she would like to speak.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much to this committee and all the work that you've been doing, all of you involved. My name's Angie Solomon. I'm a second-year medical student at Queen's University, actually, and I'm also involved in some advocacy work in this domain and a member of the Health Providers Against Poverty, Kingston. I just wanted to ask, this is my first time at this sort of thing, so excuse me if I'm speaking out of turn or if you have a particular direction that you want to focus the agenda. But I was wondering if maybe Ruth could speak to any initiatives looking at quality of supportive housing that's provided, or if that might feed into any upcoming reports on the state of supportive housing in Kingston, because I can imagine that might also contribute to some of the issues we're seeing with maintaining people in housing. Thank you so much for your time, by the way, and it's really a privilege to get to speak here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Solomon. Ruth, would you like to address that?
Thank you, and to you, Madam Chair. Just to make sure I understand the question. So that's a really, really important component. But you're specifically wondering about the quality of supportive housing or the quality of housing in general?
Well, I guess both, but I was thinking in particular supportive or transitionary or just essentially government subsidized housing, anything that is particularly for vulnerable marginalized populations. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for clarifying that. And through you, Madam Chair, I will kick it off, and I will ask Mitchell to jump in here as well. So there are a few. It's definitely an item that we all know is coming up across the community. The quality of housing, the landlord-tenant relationship, the jurisdiction of a funder, the jurisdiction of all the different agencies involved. So it certainly is something that is on top of mind of many of us. Within our, again, within our role as a service manager, as a city, we definitely have certain expectations and ways of holding landlords, either supportive housing landlords or social housing landlords or private landlords, accountable through property standards. We can obviously help support if there are any landlord-tenant issues with connecting tenants with the appropriate services, and obviously we can ultimately step in. I think what I would say, though, before handing it over to Mitchell, because I'm sure he will have some additional points to add, is within our social housing portfolio, again, we have certain expectations. So if there are any, and we're funding the service providers, so we have that mechanism for transitional and supportive housing projects. Again, we're kind of embarking on that now with the 2 buildings that we have purchased. There will be expectations, obviously, as well with the providers that we would be working on how those units would be maintained and how the quality will stay at an appropriate level. We also obviously have again, through our property standards colleagues, the ability to put out orders and put out expectations on the quality standards. All the new developments that are being created, again, there will be very specific requirements around the quality of the new builds. But I have a feeling that the question is mainly about existing buildings and the mechanisms that we have in place. So I will hand it over to Mitchell to see what other pieces I probably have missed here.
Thanks, Ruth, and thank you, Angie, for the question, and through you, Madam Chair. I think Ruth did quite a good job of touching on a lot of the areas of how we can assist in ensuring that the quality of units is acceptable for living standards. So I would say traditionally that role has fallen outside of the scope of what we do as a service manager. However, that is changing, that's shifting across the province, and we know that there's a need to take a more proactive approach, and we've certainly started to do that locally in working, having active discussions with a lot of councillors and as Ruth indicated, our bylaw team, real estate as well, legal. We're looking at the structure of our current funded agreements with our landlords who have rent supplement agreements, or whatever the agreement may be, to see what we can do within the structure of the current agreements and how to maybe shape those with more accountability moving forward. The social housing portfolio, we do have 16 social housing providers who are obligated to follow directives that we have in place to ensure the quality of the units are there and acceptable. We also work on a rotation. We are into those buildings. We do operational audits quite often. I think we're in there once every 3 to 5 years. We do a thorough review of all of our funded social housing providers, the governance model, the maintenance of the building, the way rent calculations are done, and all the finances. So I guess just kind of all over the place here, but just to say that we are aware of the issue of the standard of the quality of the units within the community, and we are working collaboratively with our city departments to work on solutions. As well, we have an ongoing relationship with the Kingston Community Legal Aid Clinic, and working on addressing and ensuring that all the tenants within the community know their rights as tenants under the Residential Tenancies Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitchell. Angie, did that help answer your question?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair, and thanks to both of you for your answer. Am I allowed just a brief follow-up?
Yes.
Is that okay? Can you just say again what when the most recent kind of published review occurred, and where I might be able to find that if it is indeed published?
Ruth, is that something you were?
Mitchell alluded to it, sorry.
Yeah, so I think through you, Madam Chair, I think Mitchell made a referral to our ability to have operational reviews that we establish with our social housing providers with Unity. And again, as part of our system review for the homelessness sector, we will be able to also use those pieces. The most recent one might not be the best example, but the most recent one prior to the pandemic was actually our operational review of Townhomes Kingston, which is one of the social housing providers. That actually resulted in us as a service manager calling that basically a project in difficulty is the official term, which meant that we as a city basically took over the management of that operation. So that's an example. I don't know if that's, we're happy to definitely follow up with you on sharing some of that, but that's the most recent that we did as a service manager. And we do again have that ability, but we only have that ability with our social housing providers as a service manager to call these projects in difficulty and take over these properties. If it's a matter of, for instance, there are also quite often, for instance, our private landlords where we may not have a direct involvement as a city, and then it really goes back to a property standards issue and really making sure, and again, as Mitch has mentioned, working with our community partners to make sure that tenants really have that support and know how to advocate for their rights, because there's quite often that maybe not that that kind of understanding of what tenants' rights are, and there might be some fear, obviously, especially in a more tighter rental market to lose housing, even if it's not necessarily high quality housing. So I think it's really identifying a challenging kind of, again, a relationship sometimes between, yes, the housing might not be great, but I'm also worried about losing my housing. So how does the tenant then navigate that situation? And again, there's amazing resources in our community that can support with that. And that's something where with some of the recent conversations that we've been having about some projects, we are working with our other departments in a legal clinic to really look at how can we create some better kind of access to education on what tenants can and cannot do. Sorry, that was a very long answer, but.
Thank you, Ruth. Councillor Neal, if you'd like to proceed.
Thank you, and thanks, Angie, for all your questions. I'll just reiterate what Mitchell said and what Ruth just said. One of the things, when we have a private organization for Housing First or rapid rehousing, the city assists in the renovations, and but we do have, and the difficulty is it's private, so I won't give you an address or anything like that, because that wouldn't be legally appropriate, I don't think. But the reality is that we have a very, very good property standards bylaw department that right now are taking multiple inspections of a site where there clearly are issues. And so sometimes the frustration with bylaw is that it may take longer than one would hope for, but it does address the issues and does force the landlord to do the improvements that are required. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neal.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Angie. That's great to have had you here to ask your questions. Thank you. Okay, so I think if there isn't anyone else from the public who wanted to speak, Elizabeth, I'm not sure if Angie was the only member of the public with us now.
Madam Chair, I don't see any further hands, but I'm just going to remind those who are here with us this afternoon, if you do wish to speak, you'll need to use the raise hand function, which you can find by opening the participants panel, and it's located at the bottom of that participants panel. I'm just going to give a couple of seconds to see if there's anyone further. And it does not look like it, Madam Chair.
Perfect, thank you. So we will move on to notices of motion, which there are not that I'm aware of. So then we will move over to correspondence. Oh, sorry, other business. Oh, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. I think I must have been like half a minute late, and you might have already done that, but because there's so many new faces around and we have a new term, I wonder if we could just spend a second getting a chance for people to introduce themselves and get to know each other. It's a nice way to start.
I have that as well under other business, introduction of committee. As this evening, I feel like now I don't really know who we are. So we'll go around. I do have the list of each of us. So I will say your name, and then if you don't mind providing us with a little introduction on yourself, that would be lovely. And thank you, Councillor Doherty, for thinking of that as well. We'll start with you, Councillor Doherty.
I feel like I've already spoken. Am I on mute? No. There's a message there saying I was on mute. I don't know why. Well, I kind of feel like I've spoken enough, but I'll just say that I've been on the committee for 2 years and I'm still learning. So it's a great committee to be a part of. It's such an important issue for every actually city in Canada, and in most of the cities around the world are actually struggling with the same problem. That's actually a surprising part about this when I first got involved in it, and how similar our issues are here to every other city in the world. But so look forward to working with everybody. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Peter Clark.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Peter Clark. I'm currently a representative of the United Way. I'm also a board member at the United Way. And I've been on this committee for, as Councillor Neal alluded to, a number of years. I'm also a retired federal public servant. I was the director of Service Canada here in Kingston. And I've been dealing with homeless issues and the administration of homeless programs since the late 90s.
Thank you, Peter. Francesca? Oh, you're on mute.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm Francesca Crete, and I live in a geared to income apartment at the Zion building, Division and Pine. It's wonderful. So I represent the basic poor person. I've had my ups and downs in life, and I'm quite comfortable now. And I have contacts with people from every walk of life, including the homeless. And I love talking to people and hearing their stories.
Beautiful. Thank you, Francesca. We'll move over to Councillor Neil.
Thank you. I'm a retired high school teacher. I've been too many years on council. This is actually my 17th year. I was on for a couple of short terms in the 90s and then back in 2010. And my second last year. So if anybody wants to run in Williamsville, the seat will be open. And I'm looking forward to being back on this committee. I chair the planning committee, and I think it's really important that we coordinate our planning with the needs, housing needs of the city. So I appreciate being back on, and I look forward. This was a great meeting. Thank you very much to the new chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. And then to this committee's Vice Chair, Tara.
Hi, thank you. So I'm Tara Everett. I'm with the Community Advisory Board with the United Way. And, you know, I have I've worked with the youth population for many years and invested in the homelessness sector. So I have I really feel privileged to be part of this committee and be engaged in the conversation. And it's my first time on a official committee like this. I've sat on lots of committees, and now I'm the vice chair of it. So I'm not quite sure how that happened, but but I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Everybody starts somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Tara. Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle McCockerty. I have a history of, I have been homeless myself and navigated the system. And now I currently, for the last 7 years, I've been working with people living in poverty or that have been homeless. I've been at the Salvation Army, Dawn House, and I currently am working as a community outreach worker at Elizabeth Fry for the social housing, Kay Healy Homes, and that's a supportive housing here in Kingston. And I'm honored to be here, may I say, and be a part of this committee for sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, and everybody else on the committee.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for being on this committee, and thank you for all of your work that you do to help those in need in our city. Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andy.
Hi, I'm Andy White. I came to Kingston about 4 years ago. I came from Brantford. There I worked with the diverse population, including at-risk and homeless youth. I came here and was working at Martha's. Unfortunately, times and the virus didn't make things too easy. I was working frontline crisis intervention, and I came across in 1 year alone over 600 interventions, ranging from everything anybody could think of. Homelessness and the fact that there aren't enough shelters and the policies of those shelters was an enormous issue for many, many people. And I'm just happy that I can hopefully be a part of this and make some good changes for those people that don't have a voice. And that's what they need. We need people who will come forward and people who will accept a lived experience and recognize it, not dismiss it. So I'm looking forward to hopefully working with a great team and creating some really positive changes for Kingston and be something that people can actually look up to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy. Len, do we have Frances Smith with us? I don't believe we do. So we do have another committee member, Frances.
Yeah.
Thank you,
today.
Elizabeth. We do have another committee member, Francis Smith, who is warden with the County of Frontenac. So at our next meeting, we'll be able to meet Francis as well. And then lastly, there's myself, and I will warn this committee. I have 2 children, 6 and 7 years old, who are at any point always a possibility that they will run in and join us within our meeting. So I will do my best to keep them occupied with crafts and snacks and so on. But there will always be that possibility throughout our meeting. So you'll have to grant me some leniency there. It's an honor to be a part of this committee. It was an honor when I first joined a term ago. I've joined as a representative with the Kingston Home Builders Association, where I am vice president. I am also chair of Habitat for Humanity here in Kingston, as well as vice president of the Boys and Girls Club and Big Brothers Big Sisters. So thank you for having me with you. My day job is with Tamarack Homes. I manage sales and marketing and our interior design offices. It's a pleasure to sort of do all the things that I do, and a real honor to take part with everybody on this committee. And I want to thank you in advance going forward into this year. The time and the commitment and the passion, it takes a lot of heart to reach out and to become a part of it. I know the heart that it takes and the passion. So thank you for that. And I'm very pleased to see so many women as well on our committee. It's lovely. Okay, so is there any other new business that anyone would like to review or add? Other business? Okay, seeing none, we will move over to the correspondence. We had received some correspondence from Mark Proofer. It was essentially an article regarding new ideas and approaches to affordable housing. An excellent article, and it brings up, I think, a lot for discussion. Certainly, I know that I agree with many of the points there, and I will say for anybody who watches this later, who is watching us now, the article is making affordable housing unaffordable, and it basically speaks to the steps that someone needs to go through in order to try and create affordable housing, and how at many various turns they are blocked from doing so. It ranges from government systems to everything else, but there are many, and then there's a detailed list. So I do recommend. It's by an author, Christopher Seep, S-E-E-P-E. So if anybody would like to read that article, or they can obtain that article through us, through Elizabeth Fawcett, our clerk. Was there any discussion that any of our committee members wanted to have regarding that article, or any particular points to review?
Sorry, Madam Chair, as a point of order on this, the correspondence is actually not available for discussion. It is there for the committee's information. If it relates specifically to a business item, it can be discussed during the business item. However, at this point, this is just for information purposes.
I see. Okay. So then, following correspondence, we simply have the date of our next meeting. I suppose if there is anything from that correspondence, and thank you to Mark for submitting that. If there is anything from that, I suppose we would be able to add that to an agenda for our next meeting. Yes. So the date of our next meeting is currently scheduled for Thursday, April 8th at 1 p.m. I believe that that we may want to, as a committee, look to potentially have a more regular set of updates together, and with Ruth and some of her team. So we will be evaluating that. I will be reaching out to Ruth. I would imagine Tara and Ruth and team and I will have a discussion on how we can proceed so that we are opening up more opportunities for continuing communication over this time, ensuring that we are in the loop, and that we also offer opportunity for those in the public to come forward and speak as well and express themselves as well. Thank you. Perfect. So if I see nothing else to add, then we will move forward to adjournment. Can I have a first for adjourning our meeting? Councillor Neal, Councillor Doherty, and all are in favor. Thank you. Thank you for a great first meeting of our 2021 new year, where everything will be upward and moving in a positive direction.
It's Pavlovian. If you say adjourn, councillors' hands go up right away.
Pretty much
Great
everything.
meeting you all, and this is a great first meeting. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks for your time. Bye-bye.